Wonderful. So as I mentioned, my name is Mary Kate. And yes, this is Impact Zero. Our wonderful guest, Kyle, is here tonight. Kyle Ritchie. He is the co-author of The Circular Economy for Dummies. He's also the founder of the Circular Economy Studio. He's a sustainable design lead for Canada Design's education market. And he's also an adjunct professor at the Boston Architectural College. So welcome, Kyle. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We're so excited to have you.
My pleasure.
Awesome. So Kyle, tell us a bit about your work. Tell us a bit about your story. Why did you start this work?
Funny enough, even though I work at an architecture firm, primarily, that's my 9-to-5 job is at Canon Design. I actually am terrible at architecture. I think I got an F in structures class. I did terrible with any of my studio projects. I just got bad feedback all the time. But I did have one project where I had to pull a word out of a hat, and that was like what I had to base the entire project on. And I pulled dendrology, which is the study of trees. So this was the best grade I ever got on any of my design projects because it mimicked how water moves through a tree. There's sort of a central axis and then gathering points on either side. And so that's what my design showed. And the professors loved it. This was like the first time I ever got like, okay, you did the right thing. You're in the right spot. And then it kind of occurred to me that, okay, I did great on this one, but it wasn't because I was good at architecture. It's because I cheated, essentially. I stole ideas that were already in existence. It wasn't my original idea. So I sort of came to this realization that, well, I just need to leave architecture school and go study this instead, because this is what I'm good at. So I did. Yeah, I told my professor, I think it was like a week after that project, I was like, yeah, I'm out of here. And he was like, oh, no, don't do that. I'm like, no, I got to. Like, this is where I need to go now. And so I did. I studied chemistry and biology and natural resource management. And the more I was learning about water quality, about soil chemistry, international community development, you start to pick up on these patterns in the natural world. And the more I learned about this world versus the human world, I was like, oh, wow, this actually makes a lot of sense. There's no waste. Everything gets used extremely efficiently. If something doesn't work, it doesn't stick around, it gets tossed out. Mm-hmm. And so I started really figuring out that there were two sides to the world I live in, the natural world and then the human world that we design, and it's nothing like the other one. So this is sort of the 18,000 foot view on my brain at all times, is there's these two different sections, and my goal has always been to try and pull one towards the other. And if I can get a little bit of overlap, that's great. Mm-hmm. So yeah, after undergrad, I went to the Boston Architectural College for grad school because they have a great sustainable design program there. Mm-hmm. After that, I worked in Indianapolis at a small firm for about a year doing LEED and WELL certification. This was like my first look at green building certifications. And for me, like sustainable design was that way to begin pulling the way humans design things back towards the natural world's, approach. And at first I thought, okay, I'm in the Midwest, which if you don't know is not really the most progressive type of people. Our energy code still is in 2007, I think, in Indiana at least. And so once I got introduced to sustainable design, I thought it was going to be, okay, this is like the pinnacle. This is as good as it gets. Mm-hmm. This is just what I need to spread in the architecture industry. This is going to be it. And then the more I started seeing how we were using sustainable design for buildings, the more I realized that there's still such a gap between the way we do things and the way the natural world does things. Mm-hmm. I'm not suggesting we just let the nature run wild, and that's what we have to live in. But there's a lot of knowledge and technology that we can actually pull from the way it operates. And so this was sort of the realization that I made after leaving the Midwest. I got a job in Baltimore for an architecture firm called Air St. Gross. And they were working for Johns Hopkins University, for Duke University, all these really high level organizations. So I thought to myself, well, surely at this scale and this level of client, like it's not just going to be we're getting LEED certified and that's it. But it was still that same discussion of like, okay, what points are we going after? Can we reduce water usage by 50%? I'm like, great, but that's like still not there yet. And it started becoming really upsetting because I was trying to get to a level where we were doing the right thing, where sustainable design was mimicking the way the natural world works. And it just kept beating me down because it wasn't happening. Like no matter where I was working, it was still, there was such a gap. Yeah. And so what I thought was going to be sort of my life's work, which would be sustainable design, now is like the thing that I'm trying to run away from. Like I don't use sustainable, even though my job title is sustainable design lead. I refuse to use it. And if someone talks to me and says A, B, and C is sustainable, I don't just nod and say, great. I ask them, what do you mean? What is sustainable about it? And 9 times out of 10, it's not actually sustainable. And so we're finding ourselves now that we think that we're doing the right thing because we're calling things sustainable and we're doing things better than we have before. So in our minds, there is progress being made, but we sort of lost this end goal. Like we're all talking about carbon now. We're all talking about energy reduction. That's fine. But we've sort of reached in our mind, we've sort of reached the playground and we're just running around in it. But we're not realizing that, okay, well, beyond the playground is actually something that's a lot better. And so that's really where the circular economy first started coming up for me. Was sustainable design, I realized wasn't even enough. So I kept looking for, okay, so what's beyond sustainability? And I actually discovered permaculture, which is much more in line with my environmental science background. So I started reading about Bill Mollison and David Holmgren and Toby Hemingway, which is my absolute favorite. And finding out, okay, so let's realize that sustainable design isn't really as great as it seems like it is. There has to be something that's more about circularity. And turns out circular economy is what that end goal ended up being for me. So as soon as I sort of came upon this, which was probably in 2017, I think was the first time I ever kind of acknowledged that circular economy exists. And there are these 3 amazing principles that make it very simple to approach water or energy or material waste, anything. And it just clicked. I was like, okay, this is that structure that finally gets the natural world and the human world to overlap.
And sorry, Kyle, I don't mean to cut you off, but maybe for the people who are here that maybe aren't as familiar with circular economy, do you mind just going through some of those principles?
Yeah, so simply enough, there are 3 principles of the circular economy. The first one is simply enough, just eliminate waste. And for people in the architecture industry, that's done through design. The second one is to keep materials in use for as long as possible. And that really supports the third principle, which is to regenerate natural systems. So if you're keeping materials in use for a longer period of time, the demand on the natural environment is going to go steadily down. So the longer you can keep things in use, the less demand you have. And so even the 3 principles, managing and utilizing the 3 principles is a circular process, because by maintaining resources, you're therefore mitigating and removing future waste. So it's sort of this cyclical process. And so it seems very abstract, but once you start finding opportunities to apply them, you see how very easily it can be applied, and you start seeing the success come from it. I'm working on a project at TCU right now. There's a student housing with a cafeteria underneath. And I again didn't talk about it within the framework of the circular economy, but bringing up these 3 strategies of how we're going to tackle food waste. And it's turned out to be really successful. So already I'm finding ways to apply it that if I was just focusing on sustainability, it would have just been, okay, well, let's figure out signage so that we can make sure people are recycling the right things in the right areas.
Yeah.
But for the circular economy, recycling is literally a last resort. Like, it's the last thing we want to do.
Yeah. No,
so all of this,
you mentioned that. The 2 pieces.
It's so critical. And so that's sort of that I don't want to say sustainability is bad, because I appreciate what it's done. It's made, I'm sure most of the people on the call, sustainability was that initial motivation that got you interested in being proactive about making the world a better spot. So I don't ever want to say that I don't like sustainability, but I don't think it's a productive tool anymore. I think we've uncovered what areas we need to be focusing on, but we need now a structure that allows us to approach these things in a mindful way that makes sense. And sustainability, you can't really find a structure. I mean, you always hear the 3 pillars of sustainability, which is economics, social and environmental. Yeah, but what does that tell you to do with those 3? It doesn't, there's no activity behind it. No. So this circular economy was really sort of that gap that I was looking for after going through, my science studies and trying to find that middle ground. It wasn't until I found the circular economy that sort of made sense. Like, here it is.
Yeah, no, that's so good. I'm really glad that you pointed that out, because I was talking to somebody the other day and they said, well, what are you interested in? Or I was asking them, like, what are you interested in? And they said, well, I'm interested in, supply chain and the value chain and like how to, make it more sustainable. And I said, so the circular economy.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh yeah, I guess. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
But it's like, you don't put that together unless you have somebody kind of saying, no, that's like that. Yes, you can have a sustainable supply chain. Sure. But is it circular? And then that's like that next level. So that's so interesting. Thank you for sharing that. And so, okay, tell us a little bit more about your work and what you do, on a day-to-day basis. Maybe tell us about the Circular Economy Studio and what's the mission there?
Yeah. So my day is pretty much split between right now 3 different organizations from, fortunately my fiance is in med school right now. So she's awake at like 5:30. So she does not let me sleep in anymore. So she's like kicking me, telling me to get up, do something. So now I get started at like 5:45, 6 a.m., which I guess is the first sign of real adulthood, is being up consistently early. But
it's hard.
So I usually spend the first 2 hours of my day replying to emails, posting on social media for Circular Economy Studio, reaching out to people like at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation or Revolve Circular in the UK, just trying to like keep up to date with what they're doing, if there's anything I can do to help. And then there are a few like consultant jobs that I have going on right now for that. So that's like the first 2 hours. And then it's the 9 to 5 at Canon Design, which, it's all of their higher education and K through 12 projects. So any of the projects that we get signed on within that market, whether or not they're pursuing a green building certification or not, I'm sort of meeting with the team in pre-design, setting some goals based on whatever state they're in. There are going to be different codes that we need to comply with. So that usually means I'm talking with our energy modelers very early too. But a lot of it is, the best thing about that job is I'm really not that smart of a person, but I'm surrounded by so many smart people that my job is essentially to make sure that they're in the room to talk.
Mm-hmm.
I'm fully aware that's my biggest asset, is to not be the smart person, just find them and bring them to one spot to talk. And so that's what I do. So we've got amazing architects and engineers and energy modelers in-house. So my job is to just look at the schedule and pinpoint what meetings need to happen when, and just manage that side of things. So yeah, we're going through a great process right now for St. John's University in New York City, where there's actually a carbon tax now. I think it comes into play in 2025 for them. Any state funded university has to reduce their carbon emissions by a certain percentage. I can't remember what it is. But we now have this process that we're going through with them, where they're realizing, we need to hit net zero. But to them, that's just like sort of this out there. They don't really know what that means. So it's been amazing and a big learning opportunity for me to sit down with our mechanical engineers, our electrical engineers, and our badass energy modelers, which are like wizards, and figure out, okay, so let's figure out what these metrics are. So there's initial cost, there's life cycle costs, maintenance cost, ease of maintenance over time, energy sources. And we sort of create this grid based on all these metrics and their available systems. And we essentially give them a grade. So based on system 2, the life cycle cost is the highest. So we'll like create a little scorecard of our own. And then just by doing that and putting that in front of the client, we can talk through all of the different variables, even weight certain categories. So if there's like, no, we want to have the system paid off in 15 years, we know to weight, that system 1 over system 2 within that category. It doesn't sound very interesting, but I think we got our energy reduction just by going through that process, over 50% reduction just by doing that. So that's even before we addressed renewable energy at all. I think this is exciting. Now I'm realizing maybe half the people on here like, oh my God, like move on. But now I'm taking them through, this will be the last bit of this story, but I'm taking them through what's called a power purchase agreement. A lot of people, thanks Yasha, he's got me. A lot of people can't afford renewable energy systems. So whether it's on-site or off-site. And so I've found a bunch of people who offer power purchase agreements. So they have no upfront cost at all. So the university can still buy renewable energy or use renewable energy, but they don't own the panels. Aaron's going to love this. It's essentially a service as a product in some way, because you don't have to worry about the maintenance, initial costs. They'll take care of everything. We just submit them our roof plan. We have a solar panel designer person on our team, but they have one as well. And so we've figured out for them how they can get renewable energy to offset the building completely, and they don't have to pay anything up front. They just essentially pay a utility bill each month. And it's sort of this process from start to finish that I could not do it myself. I don't think I could touch one of these successfully and be somewhat useful. But because I know what everyone else can do, that's again my strong suit, is knowing what conversations need to happen and when. And it's an amazing job, honestly. So then by this time, it's about 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the evening. And now I'm teaching resilient design at the Boston Architectural College for their graduate sustainable design course, which is mostly online. Usually there's at least a couple of weeks in Boston during the 8-week program, but because of COVID and everything, it's fully online, which is a bummer. But no, I've had people in, I think, 4 different continents now in classes of mine. it just draws in so many different amazing people with amazing backgrounds. Some people are twice my age, and I'm just like, hey man, how's it going? It seems very very unfitting sometimes for me to be doing it, but again, it's like whenever they talk to me about something I don't know, I know someone who knows it, and I'll literally arrange the call so they can get whatever information they need. So I'm very well suited for every job that I have, but I'm just grateful that most of it is just coordination and pulling information from one place and delivering it to another. But yeah, that's sort of my span. I've got those three main pieces right now. If the ladies got some studying to do or something, I'll usually jump back into circular economy studio stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's funny. You always hear people say you won't work a day in your life if you find something you enjoy. And it really does actually feel like that sometimes, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah.
So I'm so glad I dropped out of architecture school and didn't find myself just designing stairs for the first decade of my life, or it kind of catapulted me into this realm that I probably shouldn't belong in, but I'll just not really advertise that a whole lot. But
don't say that.
I'm all jokes
you're very
aside, though.
suited.
It's a very well suited role for me in every regard. And I mean, I get to meet people like you and Aaron and others who are doing similar things that are killing the game, and I get to ask you all questions and try and figure it out on my end. So that's probably been the best part of all of this, is when you become passionate about something, you start to easily find other people who are passionate about similar things. So it's pretty incredible. Never thought, starting architecture school, I'd end up doing what I'm doing now, but I'm thrilled that I am.
Hey, well, I thought I was going to be a vet, so here we are.
There you go. Yeah, stuff happens.
Exactly. And like you said, when you're passionate about something, you meet other people who are passionate about the same thing. And I think that's the beauty of Impact Zero and the network, and, being virtual and being able to really actually meet such cool people who are doing the work and really putting in the time. And that's awesome.
You guys have an amazing organization.
We do. Right, Aaron?
Oh yeah. Fun fact, it's our second birthday today. I did not even realize until 7 p.m. tonight.
Wow. Yay.
So fun.
That's awesome.
Happy birthday.
So exciting.
What is it, year 2, you said?
Yeah, year 2 going into year 3.
Wow.
Awesome.
I'm sure it's flown by.
Oh yeah.
It has. Yeah. I mean, I've only been here for but I've been here for one of those years.
Half of its life.
Yeah. Yeah, really flown. So I guess, Kyle, how are you feeling about some of the difficulties and the barriers that you face, whether it's through Canna Design, whether it's through Circular Economy Studio, what are some of the difficulties and barriers that you're facing? And by the way, for anyone who has written a question in the chat, we'll get to those at around 8:15. And then that way, we'll just have a designated time to just answer it. We'll have a free for all of questions for Kyle.
There you go. I think probably one of the biggest barriers that I'm finding, and I'll say this with my Canon design hat on. It's really difficult to get people to pay attention to the fact that a building can last twice your age, twice your life cycle, your individual life. Because that's really the value that I'm trying to show them, is if you design this building right, you're offsetting the need for 2 or 3 additional buildings. That's a lot of money your organization can save. And for them, some of these folks who work for these major universities, they wait 10 or 15 years to be put on a project like this to create this legacy building. So for them, it's more important to get it done right, and bringing in these new concepts of, well, how about we introduce flexibility and adaptability over time? How about we address that, yes, embodied carbon is important, But if you use a concrete structure, even though it has less embodied carbon than steel or even mass timber, those won't be able to last 150, 200 years like a steel structure would. Like you can design a building to last that long. Wow. And the most ironic part is all of the buildings that we studied in architecture school that we just drooled over were built 500 years ago and are still standing. Yeah. Even more than 500 years ago. It's just, where's that disconnect? Like, when did we stop trying to figure out how can we build something that will last? Like, when did that variable of quality end? And that's something that I still struggle with on a daily basis. Even the materials that we're specifying inside the building only have a 10-year life cycle. And so they understand, like, some of these finishes are only going to last 10, 15 years, but we're not designing any sort of plan so that when this time comes, okay, what's the next stage of this material's life? Yeah. What material are you going to use in place of this? What other purpose on your campus can this material that you're going to be removing from this building, can it serve another purpose? And once you get into that, like, that futuristic mindset of, okay, let's not just design the building as it is today, but let's design what it will be in 100 years as well. You lose people immediately. And I need to really fine tune, I think, how I'm talking about those things. Because I love thinking about what the world will look like in 100 years. Like, it just makes me so happy to just daydream about that, because doing that allows me to sort of reverse engineer what needs to happen to get there and what I can do now versus what needs to be happening by the time I'm at the end of my career. Mm-hmm. And it's got to be the most difficult thing. I can empathize with the people on the university side, because they do have a job to do. Like, they go home at the end of the day, they're just worried about getting their project done. They don't need some guy running in and being like, yes, but imagine in 100 years, like, that's, yeah, great, man. But I need the paycheck. I need to get this job done. Mm-hmm. So unless there's a really strong narrative behind it, or students saying that we need things to change on campus, mm-hmm. or unless you prove the financial value of any of the decisions that you're trying to suggest, those are probably the three tools that I can use to sort of make changes that haven't really been occurring before. But I mean, how do you explain the circular economy principles to someone who's never heard of the circular economy, and try to also explain to them the difference between the circular economy and sustainability? Like, it's just such a fresh thing in the US, and I think North America too, when compared to Africa and Europe. That it's just, there's so much education that needs to happen behind it, that now it makes me nervous, because now I'm not saying circular economy either. Just like I'm not saying sustainability, but I'm almost doing it for a different reason. People know what sustainability is, but I don't want to get into the weeds too much by talking to them. Okay, this is what the circular economy is all about. So it's a very tough balance between education and implementation. Like, that's got to be the biggest balance I'm trying to figure out as I'm talking with all of these different organizations that do end up having really amazing buildings. Like, I'm working on an applied physics lab right now for Johns Hopkins, and it's just like, this is amazing. They're helping NASA do things. Like, they get hired by NASA, like, to do their research for them. Wow. And so you have all these amazing people, but it's just, they have their goals. So how do you sort of encourage them to consider yours? I mean, there's just, it's a difficult task, but it's one worth doing, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. The piece about education reminded me about, we had a speaker last week, Frances Edmonds. She works to help educate schools on her spare time about, sustainability and the circular economy. And I mean, we're seeing such a theme. It's coming up. It's like, you can't talk about it without having people in the room who know what it is, right? Or else it's like you won't get anywhere. So
right. But I'm hoping that as people do learn what it is, that it doesn't become so stretched like sustainability has. Like, I think the best thing that circular economy has going for it is that it's essentially defined by those three principles. And I really hope that they don't get separated at any point, because that's like the destiny of circular economy will be dependent on whether or not those three principles, those guiding principles, stick with it. So as soon as you start hearing people talk about circularity without referencing one of those three principles or all, like not going very well.
Yeah, no,
that's what I'm nervous about. But
yeah,
you're right though. Yeah, it's how do you educate people on it without just sort of boring them or going into a whole lesson about it?
Yeah, I think that's definitely something that we have to keep in the toolkit in the back pocket. And just know that it's definitely going to be worth the time, worth the effort, worth the energy to do, because it, regardless, it'll still push the needle.
Right.
But speaking of which, so, we covered some of the barriers, but let's hear about some of the things that are actually going really well, and some things that, some good opportunities that you're seeing right now.
Yeah. And I think one of them actually answers one of the questions I saw pop up, or actually multiple. So the cool thing about applying the circular economy to architecture is you'll have the design process, the actual construction and use of the project, and then you'll have the end of life. And the really cool part about it is that they almost mirror what the three principles of the circular economy are. Like, these three phases very much represent 1, 2, and 3. So in the design phase, like, my goal is not only to ensure that I'm designing out waste by making sure that the structural grids are efficient, but I'm also making sure that they allow for flexibility and adaptability over time, so that we're using the building as long as possible. I'm also designing, working with our contractors to make sure that if there are any repetitious parts of our building that can be sort of addressed through modular design and prefab, that we can make the building very easy to disassemble at the end of its life. So there's sort of these like three different categories like I said earlier, it's a very circular process. So when I'm trying to design out waste, I'm also thinking about during the building's life cycle, as well as after the building has served its purpose and is sort of spent. But there are definitely some really good strategies involved, especially when it comes to deconstruction. When people hear the concept, okay, we're disassembling a building, they assume it's just like you recorded the assembly of the building and now you're just playing it backwards. But we're not talking about breaking down buildings to the individual nails and screws. We're not talking about taking out individual studs. My friend Dave Bennick in the state of Washington, he owns the Building Deconstruction Institute, and he's been doing this for 30 years, which is amazing to think about. He's been championing this as a pioneer of the circular economy. But he taught me that you don't need to break down a building to its individual pieces. You can actually take out massive sections of a building and reuse it elsewhere. So he's actually taking entire walls from a building, storing it, and then finding someone who needs that assembly, and then he'll ship it to them and sell it to them.
Wow.
So talking with our contractors, this not only saves them a lot in materials in terms of cost, it doesn't produce as much waste, because when you're doing prefab design and construction, usually the build is a lot more efficient. So there's not as much construction waste. And it also makes it a lot easier for the client, because now we're assembling parts of a building that, if you're doing element by element, it's going to take you 6 months. But if you already have all of the elements assembled, all you have to do is install it. It can knock down your construction timeline like a big amount. And so I always sort of have this voice in the back of my head when I'm speaking with contractors for the first time. I'm like, oh, damn it. Like, now's my time to bring up prefab. Can we do prefab? all these things that I'm like, thinking they're probably gonna be like, no, that's too hard. Like, we'll just do it the way we always do it. But I'm finding that a lot of contractors, if you bring it up, they're like, yeah, like that sounds awesome. Let's do it. We can do that. Like, it'll save us time, which means that the money that they're getting paid by the owner to build the damn thing, they're getting it done sooner. So they're making more money per hour, per person. So you start to find all these strategies popping out that, again, I couldn't do a single one of them myself, but I know who does them. Mm-hmm. And I just need to make sure that they're talking as well. So it's cool to see all these different strategies, whether it's the actual design of the building, the use and adaptability of the building over time, or the disassembly of the building at the end of its life. Seeing how that sort of mirrors the three principles of circular economy, mm-hmm. It's very satisfying, actually. So those are the good things that are happening, and hopefully they keep happening more.
Yeah, definitely. No, it's always so good to hear, like, that things are, pushing forward, that positive things are coming out of it, and, the right people are in contact with each other, which sounds like you're doing a really good job at. So.
Yeah, I'm doing my best.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. So also, you recently published a book. Maybe you could tell us a bit about it, and maybe just give us a little bit about like why you wrote it, and maybe, what readers can look forward to.
The cool thing about the Circular Economy for Dummies book is that I got to co-author it. And I don't think if I had a co-author that I would be in a position to be able to do that. So the co-author is actually our director of sustainability at Canon Design.
Okay.
But I wrote it before I started working at Canon. But I was speaking with Eric, was supposed to speak with Eric at a conference, but his flight got canceled last minute, about the circular economy in the built environment. And this would have been in 2018 or 19, I think. And he got a call a week after from Wiley, who owns the Dummies series, saying, hey, do you know anyone who could write on the circular economy for Dummies? Because he wrote Green Building for Dummies in 2008. So he had a previous connection with them.
Right.
And I think he acted as sort of technical reviewer on a few other Dummies books. So he knew that, I was really passionate about the circular economy. And he was on the podcast. Yeah. So he approached me and knew that I would without a doubt be interested in doing it. So we started writing it. It would have been March of 2020. Yes. So right when shit hit the fan and everyone had to go inside for the rest of their lives. So it was a good thing, because it kind of kept me distracted during all of this nonsense, because after work I would literally have to write. We had 9 months to write the entire thing, which was not a good time. Like, it was awful, to be honest. Thinking about having to do that again, no, I would not be up for it right now. It was tough.
Yeah.
Like, there were weeks where I would have 4 chapters I would have to write on some things that I wasn't even 100% sure I even knew about. So it was just nonstop research, reaching out to people who were experts on it, and making sure the right information got in the right spot, which seems to be, now that I'm saying all this, a pattern in my career.
But hey, you seem to prove to be good at it. So
I learned so much that now I can say, like, yes, I am qualified to have written the book, just because I made sure I was as the process went through. But there were some key chapters that I already was well versed on, and that Eric was already well versed on, that those went pretty smoothly. Like the food chapter was my bread and butter, and then the I think it's chapter 16 maybe is for circular economy for builders. And that was Eric's, forte, because he's been an architect for 30 years. But supply chain management, I was sort of up to speed on, but
Mhm.
trying to learn about packaging and distribution and shipping. I was never really familiar about any of that, but now I am.
Now you are.
So that was the best part about the book, is it indirectly made me pretty up to date on a lot of topics around the circular economy in markets and industries that I wasn't familiar with. So it was both a blessing and a curse to get that opportunity. It was terrible to go through it, but now I'm glad I did. It's like training for a marathon almost.
Yeah.
But yeah, it became, I think it would have been a couple of months ago, it was a bestseller on Amazon in their green business section. I think it's been translated into over a dozen languages. I've been interviewed in Europe, Africa, South America, North America by journalists on it. It's had a really wide reach, which has been fantastic.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was definitely not expected that I'd get an opportunity like that, but yeah, and I sort of feel bad at times because it wasn't really something I went hunting for. Like, I'm sure there are so many opportunities like that people want so badly, but I didn't really have to. It got brought to me and set on my lap as the opportunity. So it's sad to think that there are plenty of other people, even different races and genders, that probably wouldn't have gotten that opportunity, or would have a lower chance of getting opportunities like that. So I've always had that sort of bitterness about it, but I try not to let that, pull me down too much, and I can still enjoy it. I put a lot of hard work in, and it's hopefully been helpful to a lot of people. So overall, just an amazing experience that I probably would, now that I think about it, I probably would write another book, even if it was that same terrible experience. So Aaron, I've got a publisher now, so if you have any ideas, let me know.
Yes, so many. We'll talk later.
Yeah.
Okay, there you
and
go.
You'll be on the podcast with Erin once she finishes reading it. So that's also something to look forward to.
Yeah.
Everyone join tonight.
And I know that it's like everyone's deal now to start a podcast, and I'm probably not the best one to do it, but I've been convinced to do it. So on the first day of spring, my official first episode will come out with Eric talking about the book, and then the plan is every 2 weeks after that. So I've got Rhaenyra O'Donnell from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation lined up for the second episode. Dave Benning from the Building Deconstruction Institute, he'll be number 3. And then Deborah Dahl, she was the I'm going to get her title wrong, but she used to work for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation as their sort of life cycle supply chain management expert. She was at Microsoft before then. She's working for a company called 0100 now in, I think it's London, which is, I think, more about financing circular economy businesses. But there's just so many good people that I've met through writing the book. And even after that even though I hated the idea at first, the more I think about it, it's like, it actually makes sense, because there's a lot of discussions that probably should have taken place in the book that there just wasn't the capacity for it. So this is the follow-up of all the things that wasn't able to be included in the book. So
no, that's awesome.
But you won't hear me call it a podcast while listening to the show a single time, because something about that word just, I don't like it. So I'll just refer to it as like the show and stuff like that. But
and what's the name of the show, just for?
Oh my God, this was actually this was my fiance's idea, because I'm complaining about the word sustainability so much all the time. I think she was half kidding when she suggested I call it this, but I decided to maybe catch some people's attention. So it's quite literally called Don't Call It Sustainable is the name of the show, not podcast, the show.
Okay, so
so it's built on the premise that the circular economy offers more than just sustainable, that's about regeneration which sustainability does not really address. So
no, I love that.
It's my goal to, I guess, rattle some cages a little bit with the title.
Hey, who knows? It might bring some conversation.
It'll be a fun next adventure, and I'm already learning about, video editing and audio editing and other things that are pretty simple to pick up once you learn the basics. So first day of March, first day of spring, March 20th, the first episode will come out, and then 2 weeks after that. So there will be a promotional video coming out, I think, on March 1st. We have it ready to go out by March 1st. So keep an eye out for all of that.
No, that's so exciting. Thanks for sharing that. And
of course.
Yeah, and then we'll spread it widely. So
appreciate that. It'll be a fun adventure. So we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, you got to try it at least once, and then might as well.
If it crashes and burns, it crashes and burns.
At least you tried.
There you go.
Okay, so let's answer some questions. I don't know if you have them open, but maybe let's start with Emma's. Would you recommend getting the WELL AP for people who are interested in creating healthy buildings for people, or another cert?
Healthy buildings for people, WELL is definitely a good credential to get. Buildings get certifications, people get credentials. Definitely get WELL, or there's something called Fitwell that you can become an ambassador for that. And we're actually finding that Fitwell is a lot more attainable for some clients, because it's not as onerous, and there's not as much work pursuing Fitwell as there is WELL. I may be wrong, but I don't believe there's the need for recertification every 3 years either. Don't quote me on that, because now that I'm thinking about it, I might not be right. But Fitwell or WELL, both of those pay special attention to not necessarily the health of the building itself, like energy use, but for the health of the materials inside the building, as well as the health of the patrons. So those two would be good to check out.
Okay, that's good to know. Rossi, I think you might have answered Putera's in incorporating modular components. So as long as we feel like that one was.
At what point do you typically find the best results on introducing prefab with contractors? So if it's a project where the contractor is going to be there, the drawings go out for bid, different contractors submit proposals, and then eventually the owner picks one. As soon as they pick that contractor, get a meeting with them immediately, because especially if they're going after a green building certification, it's very important for me to get it on paper in meeting minutes, saying that they agreed to pursue environmental product declarations, health product declarations, all of the material tracking that contractors will need to do. Same thing when it comes to the prefab components, because they'll have a really good idea based on building type whether prefab will be financially viable or beneficial for not just them but the owner and their construction timeline. So it's kind of a cheating answer by saying as soon as possible, but that's really the answer, is as soon as possible.
No, that's a good point. Yasha was also wondering, okay, how is circular economy different from cradle to cradle, or is it different?
Well, Aaron, you might know the guy's name, William McDonough. Do you know who I'm talking about? He wrote this book, Cradle to Cradle. I think it was in the 90s, maybe. William McDonough or something like that. But he actually started this phrase, cradle to cradle, which is really the first building product certification to focus on the full life cycle of a material, not just its components and whether or not they off gas into the environment once they're installed. So this was really the first look at full life cycle health of a material. And it doesn't dictate what the material is made out of per se. It doesn't dictate how long the material is in use for, and it doesn't dictate where the material goes after it's taken out of the building. So although Cradle to Cradle does give you the information about the material and the first part of its life cycle, it falls very short of the circular economy because it's not really in their responsibility. Like, they're just giving you the information. How long it's used for is based on what it's used for, and what happens after it is who knows nowadays. Like, is it the owners? Is it the architect? We don't want to just do, operation and maintenance manuals. It's almost like operation, maintenance, and disassembly manuals. Like, here's what you do with all of these things after you don't need them anymore. But that's a really good question. Yeah.
No, that's a great question. Have you been able to tie circular economy, prefab, and passive house yet on a project?
Ooh, passive house is not my forte, and I'm 100% okay saying that. There are some people that are all about it. I don't have anything against it, but I have no idea how prefab works with passive house. I'm really not up to date on what passive house is. But if you do want to reach out, I know plenty of people who know about passive house, and I can get you an answer. So I'll put my email in the chat. And what I do best, I contact people I know and get you in touch with them. So there.
Perfect. Oh, that's super helpful. Yes. So,
Live action connections.
Yeah.
What's that?
Live action connections happening.
Live action.
That's how you got to do it. Kyle, I have a question. Since COVID, how has your thinking changed when it comes to circular design?
Like, as COVID as an influence to design?
Yeah.
I think
or
we're
has
seeing.
It changed? If it's not, that's okay too. I'm just curious.
No, it definitely did get influenced, and it's really all about the ability of a space to be used for multiple things, because now we're finding all of these empty spaces that are just sitting there when there are plenty of other needs for them, but they don't necessarily have the right systems installed or the right technology. Yeah. And so we're going to get to this point, I think, where this whole service as a product mentality, where I'm not talking about just renting a building, but having sort of what is that called? WeWork. I know those were popular. I don't know if people still use those after COVID, but I foresee building design needing to adjust to account for variability in the future, or change in technology or process or information, because COVID shows us that we aren't prepared for shocks to the system. So being able to design for the unknowns is a real skill that I think COVID has helped us understand that we need to get better at.
Yeah. No, that's such a good point. Expect the unexpected. Aladdin was wondering, I'm curious if you have any thoughts on the intersection of circularity and law. Are contracts or lawyers getting in the way of circular projects at any points? Are there tricky legal questions to be solved, or interesting contractual agreements you've seen?
Interesting. I think ownership of material is going to be something that lawyers are going to be playing a much larger role in, especially once architects and contractors and the owner all find out that the materials that are being installed will still have value at the end of their life. When we're demolishing buildings, the owner doesn't get those materials most of the time. The contractor is responsible for removing them from the site and recycling them. But what happens when the contractor finds out, oh, instead of actually tearing this down, we could actually like keep these materials, use them on the project we're starting down the road, and save a bunch of money doing that. Well, then the owners can be like, well, no, those are my materials. Like I own those, so you can't just take them. And so I think that's really going to be, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I was actually talking to Eric about that. That's going to be like, who has the right to claim materials once we all realize that we're throwing them away for no reason at all?
Yeah. Yep. It'll be a cold day when that happens.
So contracts are going to play a much bigger role when we start getting into that territory about who owns the materials and, who gets to essentially go cha-ching, I got all this now.
Yeah, seriously. Good point. Emma was curious to hear your overall thoughts on the fruit salad of certifications, both for buildings and building products. Declare, GreenGuard, FSC, etc., has created a really complex landscape, both for designers and manufacturers, and also for buyers. How do you see that playing out in the future? Do you foresee any kind of standardization or centralization oversight?
I will first agree that it is a complete mess. Like I should be well aware of what Passive House is all about. I'm generally no, but there's just so much that I haven't gotten to it yet. And that's sort of what your question is identifying, that I'll agree with, is I love that fruit salad, by the way. That's essentially what it is. Like there's so many different pathways based on building type, based on what state you're constructing the building in, what type of building is it? Is it a core and shell gut out? Is it a new construction project? Is it for a school? Is it for a hospital? Is it for, I don't know, whatever, what other buildings are they? Hell, I don't know. But there's so many varieties that you need so many varieties of green building and product certifications. But I think you'll start to see some of them merge over time. Like maybe Declare and GreenGuard are the Sprint and T-Mobile. Maybe one day they'll be the same thing, and they'll just sort of realize we can just sort of, pair off and come up with something in the middle. And I think we'll start to see that more and more, just because it will be necessary, because you're already seeing some certifications stand out more than others because they caught on first. And as these issues arise and new certification platforms come out, well, these existing certification platforms are just going to incorporate it too. So it's like, okay, we already know all this. We're just learning a little bit more. So why would we bother going over here to do this? Unless it's very specialized, like for materials like GreenGuard, or FSC is only for wood. I think it's impossible to know what's going to happen, but it's a mess and we all are well aware of it. So if there's just a certain material or a building type that you work on, or a certain material that you work with a lot, then I would just say look for which certifications kind of deal with those the most, and then jump on it. I mean, that's what I do. Yeah, no, that's a good point. That's all you really can do right now within the mess, is trying to sift through it, find some find out what you can work on and learn and handle. I've got my lead BD&C, my ID&C, my well AP, my Eco Districts AP, and now my True Advisor. And that's over the span of, I think, like 6 years. And now I've forgotten half of what Eco Districts is all about. So it's just like, there's limited space in here. Yeah. It's like, some of these I can't even bother exploring, because it's just like, someone else surely knows. I don't need to know. That's fair. I understand that. Wow. I want to be mindful of your time. So thank you so much, Kyle, for joining us and answering all our questions and providing us with so much insight. This was so wonderful. So thank you so much again. And I'm just going to drop a link to donate in the chat, just because I know that these are free, but if anybody did want to donate, feel free to do so. And then also we have upcoming events. March 9th, we have our next Explore series. We're going to be talking all about circular packaging, innovation and action, with Matt and Charles, who were both Impact Zero's Impact Accelerators projects. And on March 15th, we also have the Circular Business Networking. So please join for those. And once again, Kyle, thank you so much for joining us this evening. And I hope you have a lovely afternoon, night. Thank you so much. It's been a lot of fun. we'll be in touch, I'm sure.
So fun. Yes, definitely. And everybody, make sure to go listen to the show. It's not called Don't Call It Sustainable. And
Don't Call It Sustainable.
And then after that, or after Aaron's done reading Circular Economy for Dummies, then you two will have your own show together.
Yes.
The Impact Zero podcast. So many podcasts to watch out for.
A lot of good discussions to be had, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm excited. No, I'm excited.
Thank you so much for having me. I really did enjoy it.
Yes. Oh, thank you. I'm so glad. Well, have a great night, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. And we'll see you in March.
All right. Take care.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Oh, wait, we're still recording.
Oh, okay. I'll stop. There we go.